Danielle Cook is a professional nutritionist and cooking instructor. We are excited to have her with us for today's Cooking with the Cook Sisters Vanilla program. So with that, please welcome Danielle.
I want to get started with two. One of the first recipe we're going to do today involves a savory dish with vanilla, which you might not necessarily think to pair vanilla with savory. So this is a great idea for you to play around with. And given the weather temperature flux from 80 degrees yesterday and possible snow flurries tomorrow, we are working with some winter squash, which can straddle warmer weather or colder weather, I believe. So I'm actually going to work with with butternut squash today, and I'm going to go ahead and flip us over to my cooktop so you can actually see as I take you through this the step-by-step process. The recipes, as Libby said, should be in your chat section, so you can open that or just enjoy and watch. So we've got butternut squash, which you certainly can peel and cube this and seed it, but you can also get, most conveniently, what I'm going to use today are the already pre-cubed pieces of squash. This is a couple tablespoons of butter that are melting in my cooktop, and I'm going to start by combining some walnut halves and pieces and browning them, or at least coating them with the butter. And then we're going to add our butternut squash right into that and get the butternut squash pieces ever so slightly browned or caramelized, and that'll take just a few moments. You can, if you're not a fan of walnuts, you can certainly substitute a different kind of nut. You can substitute pine nuts, or pecans are excellent with this. And as you can see from the size of the walnuts, I'm leaving most of them large. If you wanted to break them down, you could. I don't think you want to really smash these. You know, I don't think you want to put these in a bag and like really turn them into very small pieces, because I like the crunch of it. And walnuts, of course, are a fantastic brain food, right? Look at that. What does that look like? It looks like our brain, or at least a half a brain. So yeah, I mean, these are great source of good essential fatty acids and a good source of protein. So we want the heat to really get going on this. These are nicely coated in butter. So we're going to go ahead and put the butternut squash in there. And it's starting, I can hear, you know, cooking is about all the senses, right? It's about the color, the texture, the flavor combination. And as it cooks, you need to listen as well as best you can for that sizzle. And you can also see, so that's going to get going. So this is going to combine not only the squash and the walnuts, but we're going to add some seasoning in the form of ginger, thyme, and then of course our vanilla extract, or vanilla. So this is the vanilla pairs well with this vegetable, because it's got this fabulous aromatic, right, flavoring to it and smell to it, and it adds this layer of seasoning and of taste that is very, very, very unusual. And I think you will find if you play around with it and give this a try, I think you'll be really, really beautifully, pleasantly surprised at how great this combination is. The other thing to note is you don't have to use butternut squash. So you can use red curry squash. You can use there's a variety that's been out for a couple of years that looks a lot like our butternut, but it's called a honey nut, and it's a crossbreed of the squash, and it's very, very sweet. It's even sweeter than the butternut squash. Red curry is another favorite of mine. That's curry, K-U-R-I, not like the seasoning curry, but curry, K-U-R-I. And it's a very, very dark red fleshed squash that's gorgeous. You can actually do this dish with by leaving the skin on the Cory, because it does, unlike the butternut squash skin, which really I mean, it's edible, but I don't think it has a particularly good texture to it. The Cory, when it's either roasted or caramelized, the skin does become tender and entirely deliciously edible. So let's see how we're doing here. I want to just get this all properly coated and a little bit caramelized. You do need to watch it because you don't want to burn it. There's one side that's starting to brown a little bit. We are not going to sit here and watch the whole thing cook. I will, as soon as I get everything in, we're going to take the lid on it and let it do its thing for a few minutes, and then we'll move on to the second recipe. But you do want to take a few minutes to just get it, get the caramelization going. And we're going to add some thyme, a little bit of thyme, and I can go ahead and do that now. Dried thyme, you can, if you have fresh thyme, that's great as well. The thyme will, when it comes in contact with the butter and the oil, the fat in there, it will really start bringing out the flavor of the thyme. I love thyme in so many things, and I think it works beautifully as well on squash, on all squashes. It's one of my go-to, French thyme, and it grows. You can grow it very, very easily in pots or along a walkway. And there's so many varieties of thyme, right? There's lemon thyme and French thyme and English thyme. Just lots of great varieties of thyme. So that should be definitely a recommendation, I would say, to have in your pantry or among your herbs, your go-to herbs. All right. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and give it a little bit of water. I want to let it brown a bit, but I also need to be mindful that we have other things we need to accomplish today. So I'm going to, once you give it the water, once you put a little bit of water in there, at that point, we're going to add the grated ginger and our vanilla. And then I will toss it again and reduce the heat and then cover it and let it cook for about probably closer to 10 minutes until it's tender, but not mushy. And that's kind of a key component, right? You want tender, but you don't want mushy. Okay. Yep. There we go. Browning up nicely. I can see the walnuts are getting a little bit darker, some of them here. There's some nice brown marks here on these. So let's go ahead and add. The water amount is going to be, you're going to need between about a quarter to a half a cup of water. That's going to depend on how quickly the cubes absorb. And you won't know that till you get the water in there. So from a visual standpoint, you want to see that there is, it's not, the bottom of the skillet is got about a quarter of an inch of water. And once we get the cover on there, I'm going to reduce the heat a bit. Once we get the cover on there, that will definitely, the squash will definitely be absorbing, and you'll be able to, it will sort of steam cook, right? Without the cover, the water's just going to evaporate quickly without thoroughly cooking the squash. Okay, I have a little bit of good sea salt. I'm just going to sprinkle some salt on there. That adds some flavor, and it also will help any moisture in the vegetables in the squash come out and help the cooking process. All right. And now for some ginger. Beautiful, healthy ginger. Again, what great ingredients in this dish. Combination of just healthful and flavorful. So you need 1 to 2 teaspoons of ginger. And I'm literally going to just eyeball this. On my microplaner, it gathers on the other side of the microplaner of the blade. And you may be wondering, did I peel or did I not peel my ginger before starting to grate it? Well, you don't have to peel it, but I find that just giving it just a slight peel on one side helps the grating process, in that the ginger really catches nicely into the blade of the microplaner. So I do peel one side, but you don't have to. It's the entire thing. The skin is edible as well. You might get little brown flecks in your dish depending on what you're making, and so it might be more desirable to peel the ginger in that regard. But you can see there's a good teaspoon and a half. And now vanilla. And today in this dish we're using vanilla extract, and we're going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes about the different kinds of vanilla. I mean, vanilla is vanilla, but the different formats in which you can purchase them. So we're going to go ahead and do a teaspoon of vanilla extract. For the recipe calls for a teaspoon. This is about a half of the recipe amount, so I'm only going to do about a half a teaspoon. Right in there, so that aroma, and it's going to just absorb into the squash as the squash cooks. And you can imagine what I'm smelling right now. It's just heavenly. Just beautiful. Yummy. Okay. So let's put a lid on this. And we're going to give it a few minutes. And I'm going to take a quick pause here just to see if you guys have any questions that you would like to ask me, and then we can move on to the second recipe.
Hey, Danielle, we definitely got some great questions coming in. So the first, curious if coconut oil would work similarly to the butter, or maybe the flavor would compete too much with the vanilla and the squash. What are your thoughts on using coconut oil with this recipe?
That's a great question. Well, you're trying to showcase the vanilla. So I think I would not do 2 tablespoons of coconut oil. I think that's going to really overpower things. You can get, I've been using a fair amount of the aroma-free coconut oil, which works beautifully for sauteing, and you don't have that. It does not, the aroma, that coconut aroma is removed, and yet you still have the health benefits of the oil itself. So that's a thought. If you haven't used the aroma-free coconut oil, that's a great one to also to have in the pantry. So I would say try using it. You could use it, but reduce the amount, because you don't want to really compete, which of course the coconut might compete. That taste and smell would compete with the vanilla. So reduce it, or try an aroma-free coconut oil.
Someone in the chat also suggested maybe trying avocado oil.
Yes, that would be fine. Absolutely.
Someone was asking if galangal, which is a ginger relative, would also work. Are you familiar with that, and would that work in this recipe?
Galangal. Well, you can. Now, galangal is more citrusy, whereas the ginger has the very distinct hot ginger flavor. I think galangal would be fine. It'll take a real back seat, so to speak, to the dish. But if you have that and you want to swap that out, I would say absolutely give it a try.
And what about substituting in ground ginger instead of the fresh, if you don't have access to the fresh?
Yes, you could do ground ginger. Now, I would use half the amount of the ground ginger, okay? Because when you use powdered, dried herbs, they're going to be more intense in flavor. Yeah.
Awesome. I think we're good for right now. If you want to jump into your next recipe, and then I'll toss some more questions your way after if you'd like, or does that work for you?
Sounds great. That works for me. So the next recipe is going to showcase pears. This is a nice recipe to have on hand. You can deconstruct it and do some ahead of time and some right. You know, it's like in stages, and it's a great recipe because you can you can have the whole thing as a dessert, or you can just have the pears on hand for other purposes as well. So let's go ahead and go to my overhead camera. So again, you can follow along of what I'm doing. And we've got beautiful pears, and we've got all the seasonings and the creamy mascarpone cheese that's going to go into this. The first step, however, is we're not going to work on the pears just yet. The first step is you want to get your wine base going. And so for that, we're going to use some red wine. I'm using, once again, the recipe calls for 2 cups of everything, but for the sake of timing, I'm actually going to reduce the amounts. So we're going to use wine and water. So it's 1 to 1. And we're going to use sugar. So we've got, calls for a cup of sugar. We're going to use actually half of that. And some cinnamon stick. Wonderful cinnamon stick. Incredible health benefits in cinnamon. Great sugar stabilizer. Great for inducing an appetite. Great warming spice, which we're going to need tomorrow around the Washington area. And then vanilla. And so let's just talk for a second. We have the vanilla extract that I used earlier, right, in this other recipe. Sorry. Just need to clear my voice there. And then we have vanilla bean, which is what we're going to use in this. These are Madagascar vanilla, and vanilla is grown all over the tropics. People, not unlike cinnamon, there's Ceylon cinnamon, Chinese cinnamon, different cinnamons from different parts of Asia, and everybody's got their take on which one is the best. But this is actually these vanilla has a similar story because they're in Tahitian vanilla, Madagascar, Guatemala. Just different. It's cultivated all over the place. This is Madagascar vanilla. Not that truthfully, I'm not a connoisseur of the different specific countries of what I wouldn't say preferred necessarily one over the other, but this just happens to be Madagascar. So what we're going to do is slit the bean open. And we're going to try to scoop out these little seeds that live in the inside. Okay, so if you've ever done this, this is kind of a tricky thing. There's tons and tons of little seeds. Can you see that on the tip of the knife? So these are just like, it looks like a paste almost. And these are all these teeny tiny little seeds. So we're going to go ahead and drop that into the wine. And do that again on the other side. Again, a nice scoop of beans, seeds. And then we're going to plop the whole bean in there. And this will start, I'm going to go ahead and put it over on my cooktop to get the wine going and dissolve the sugar while we peel our pears. Okay. All right. One other thing I wanted to show you. This was gifted to me a few years ago. You can make your own vanilla. It's really, really easy. All you need to do is buy some vodka. Doesn't have to be a good quality vodka. And you can get a hold of some vanilla beans, even ones that are not, you don't have to get, you know, they can be expensive. I did this several years back, many years back. This is, like I said, this was gifted. And I found some beans just cryovac, not in this tube. They were quite dry when I got them, but they did the job. You just plop them, a couple of beans into the vodka. And when I received this, the vodka was clear because my friend had just made it as a holiday gift a few years ago. And now you can see it's gotten very dark, and I've had it for probably 3 years, I want to say. So you're not going to get immediate results by making your own. It is a process, but as it marinates or as it ferments or as it, you know, as the bean relaxes and the seeds get into the vodka, it does change the color and smells amazing. So that makes a nice gift. So it is an easy home project to do. All right, let's now work on our beautiful pears. And as you can see, I have a basket, a little home basket with bosque and red and green Anjou. This recipe, the good news is this recipe, you need hard pears. And we know, if anybody's shopped for pears anytime, you know, you go into the grocery store, the markets, and those pears feel rock hard. Well, that's exactly what you need for this recipe. So the mushy pears will be for another day. Make pear bread out of it or whatever. So we're going to use the red one, a red Anjou, and what did I say? Yeah, a red Anjou, and then I'm also going to use a bosque. I love poaching bosque pears. They hold up great. This one actually, I just got these yesterday, and this one's already starting to soften. So good thing I'm going to cook it up. So I am going to remove the skin, and I'm generally a proponent for not peeling when you don't have to, but when we do poaching, you do want to remove the skin, because otherwise the flesh gets nice and tender and beautiful, and then you have this kind of annoying skin on the outside that sorry, I'm just dealing with my cooktop here. And then you have this annoying skin, you know, on the outside of the pear that's kind of just doesn't give for a particularly good mouth, what we call like mouth feel. Okay, let's get that peeled up. And the idea here as we get into cutting this is you're going to have it, and you want to make a little vessel to plop the mascarpone cheese into. Okay, so I will show you that right now. Cut these right down the middle. Oh, this one did actually mush a little bit. Okay, that's all right. And then I'm going to use a melon baller. And if you don't have one of these, that's okay. You can do this with a spoon. The melon baller works really, really well because it makes a beautiful little hole, right? And then I'm going to just, with my knife, I'll just cut the rest of the core out in a V shape. This side feels pretty good. I'm going to leave that one alone. I suspect most of since the stem is here, most of that, the core has gone through on this side. So again, a nice scoop, and then cut that. And I'll do this similarly on this side, just to get the rest of the stem out. There we go. Pop that off. This one got, like I said, this one already got a little bit too soft overnight, but that's all right. We can work with that. Okay. So 1, 2. All right. Meanwhile, back on the cooktop, I can hear my wine sugar mixture bubbling away. So I'm going to go ahead and slide these in. Now, depending on the size and how firm the pears are, they're going to need to simmer for at least 25 minutes, sometimes a little bit longer than that. And we're not going to have time to wait around for that today. But, you know, they make for a great, this makes for a great do ahead step. So you can do this the day before. And if you do it the day before, or even in the morning of the day that you're going to be using them as a dessert, you can just leave them to sit in the juices in the water, or not the water, but you know, in the syrup that you've created. And I'll tell you, this is really, you know, there are a lot of poached pear recipes out there, and they're all great for different reasons. But the combination of using cinnamon and vanilla, and the vanilla bean, the intensity of the vanilla flavor that comes through when you're using vanilla bean it's really worth, I think, investing in buying vanilla. I mean, I was looking at
Danielle, I'm sorry.
yes.
Are you going to be using the cutting board again, or should we be looking at you right now?
Oh, yeah. Let's look at me for a minute, because then we go back to the thanks, and we can do a couple questions too, if we need. Okay, so the intent, as I was saying, the intensity of using the bean is really, really fantastic. The other vanilla product that you may or may not be familiar with is vanilla bean paste. And all of these are, you know, vanilla is costly. It's expensive. Like everything else, it continues to get more expensive, it seems. Vanilla paste can come in a little jar or in a tube, and it keeps for a long time. So it's something that you might want to think about having on hand, especially if you're into making a lot of sweets or desserts, because you can use that instead of the bean. You could use a paste in the syrup. It's beautiful in, you know, creme brulees and creme caramels. So it's a really, really nice product to have on hand as well. So yeah, so the extract, the bean, the paste, all of those are really, really nice, really nice ingredients to have on hand. At this point, do you have any questions? And then we can move on to making our cream sauce.
Yeah, we do have some questions coming in. The first was if you could talk a little bit more about how cinnamon is a sugar stabilizer.
So it actually works to the chemistry of it is fairly complicated, but it stimulates the it stimulates it. How should I put this? It works to slow the insulin release into the bloodstream, thereby controlling or calibrating your blood sugar levels. That's the short answer of it, without
Awesome.
getting into a explanation.
Yeah. Is it possible to replace the wine with something non-alcoholic, or what could you use in place of that?
Oh, yes, definitely. You could do this with an apple cider. Mm-hmm. Now, note that you're not going to want to put a cup of sugar into an apple cider, because it's already much sweeter than a dry white wine or a dry red wine. So you would probably do a 1/4 cup of sugar with the cider. Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Why do you scoop the seeds out of the vanilla pod if you're going to put the whole bean in anyway?
Because I like to take my time with things. No, you don't have to, but opening up the bean and giving it a bit of a scrape just kind of releases the vanilla. It releases that aroma. It releases the oils that are in there. So I think that's, you don't have to, but it's going to spread the vanilla, even those microscopic seeds that are in there, that's it's just going to spread it really immediately into the wine, into the syrup.
If you don't want to use refined sugar, are there other types of sweeteners or sugars you would recommend using instead?
Yes, you can use, take your pick. You could use, I love coconut palm sugar. It's not as sweet as regular sugar or granulated. What we are using today, the sugar that I always use is an evaporated cane sugar. This is not granulated sugar. I stopped using granulated sugar a long time ago because it goes through a process where it's all the minerals of the cane from the cane sugar are extracted. I don't think you can see it on the camera too well here, but maybe when I do the overhead, I can hold this up. This is kind of it's got a beige color, so it does still have some of the minerals from the cane in it. So you could use the coconut palm sugar, you could use maple syrup, you could use a little bit of agave nectar if that's something that or honey, and what else? You could use.
Someone in the chat recommended date syrup.
Oh yeah, yes. Yeah. Now I will say we're gonna do a reduction in a few minutes of the syrup. So you may need to boil if you're not. There's the regular sugar, the evaporated cane sugar helps create a syrupy, helps the reduction and helps create a thickened syrup quite quickly. So if you're using a different product like a honey, or if you're using another liquid sweetener, you may need a little bit more time to really get a good reduction and get the thickness that you want.
Fantastic. Just one more question for you, and then we can keep jumping into recipes. If you're leaving the pears in the syrup ahead of time or overnight, then you don't heat the syrup until the next day. Is that correct?
That's correct. But you're going to cook the pears ahead of time in the syrup, but you can leave them to cool in the syrup and just set it to the side. That's essentially what I've done here. And I'm going to get into that in just a moment, because I made this yesterday. And so you would just store it in the syrup, and then there's a final step, which is we'll remove these from the syrup, and then we'll boil down what's left of this liquid into a thick syrup.
Fantastic. Well, let's see that then.
Okay. So we got one other thing to do first, which is we're going to put together our yummy cream mascarpone. So this is mascarpone. It is a kind of a cross between a cream cheese and like a creme fraiche, I would say. It's a very rich, thick cream cheese that is used in desserts, obviously, but it's also, you can use it in sauces like savory. You can use it to finish off sauces. So we're going to put together in there, we're going to do that we're going to thin it down with some half and half, and thin it down and sweeten it up. And so with that, we have some powdered sugar. And again, talking about the sugars, if you didn't want to use a powdered sugar, other sweeteners, certainly you could use a few drops of stevia. You could use some maple syrup, although again, the liquid component, you need to watch that because you don't want to end up with a really runny cream sauce. That's that's not the point of the sauce, because you want to be able to dollop this into the little wells of the pear. And then some vanilla. This would be an excellent use for some paste. If you had the vanilla paste, vanilla bean paste would be beautiful in this. And it will have a slightly more intense concentrated flavor than the extract, but this would be a great use of that. So this, look at that, yummy and creamy. Okay. Delicious. So we'll set that aside. And then, as I mentioned, I did pre-poach a bunch of these, not a bunch, but a few pears. And I'm going to just pull some out and set them on a plate, which we will use when we're getting ready to serve. So this is what they look like. They obviously changed color. I'm going to go ahead and just slip that onto the plate. Do a couple of them. And here, go ahead and take them all out. And then here you can see the cinnamon stick and the vanilla bean, which I'm going to hang on to. Why? Because I might find another use for them. So we're going to remove that, and we're going to remove these, and all of the remaining juice is going to go into a pot, and we're going to put that onto the cooktop, and we're going to boil it into a syrup. Okay, so I'm going to give you my back to me for a second. Come on, where'd you go? Okay, so once that gets reduced, and it's going to take a few minutes, but I've got one that's almost ready. So let's just take a look here. I'm going to fire this up, and we're going to come back over to the cooktop so we can take a look at everything that we've got going here and see how we're doing. Any questions at this point?
Yep, a couple more came in. There's a nice conversation going on in the chat too about this, but for people who are lactose intolerant, any suggestions for substitutes for the mascarpone?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, I have, let's see, let me think here.
So there were suggestions in the chat about maybe a silken tofu or dairy, like almond dairy substitute.
Yeah. There's a lot of products out there. I don't have one that's just jumping to mind right now that is really that consistency of mascarpone. You would need to go in a slightly different direction and find more like of a dairy-free yogurt that you really like, you know, like a vanilla yogurt type thing. Silken tofu, you know, that is a possibility, although it definitely has, it's got a real soy flavor, you know, and you could amp it up by putting a good amount of vanilla and sweetener. I love using silken tofu as kind of an add-on, you know, like instead of a tablespoon or two of cream, I will use that in soups to make it dairy-free. But I've never actually sat down to like a bowl of it.
As you're getting that ready to go, just one more quick question. Any tips if your pears get too soft, like you purchase them and they just like are super mushy? Do you just have to get new pears, or is there another way to deal with it?
So if they're really mushy, yes, you're gonna have to get new pears. But if they were soft, like this one took me by surprise. It just had one section of it that was soft, but you'll need to feel it. I mean, it needs to be firm enough that it's not gonna disintegrate when it gets into hot poaching liquid. And so, you're gonna have to be the judge of that. I mean, if you're pushing on it and it's squishy, that's not gonna, it's gonna fall apart once it gets, the heat really gets through it. So
just get new pears then.
Get new pears. Yeah, pretty. Sorry, get new pears. But yeah, that's why these are great. Buy the pears, go home and poach them, and then you won't have mushy pears in the morning.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so let's just do this this next step, which is to two things. I've got the syrup. I've got a syrup here that I started to reduce this morning from the first round of pears, and it got fairly thick, but I'm going to go ahead. I just put a tiny bit of the new juice that we just pulled off in this one. I just put a couple tablespoons in there, and we're going to get that to a good boil. I will show you on the other burner. This is what's going on with the pears. You can see they're still very white. They're simmering in the background here. So this is going to take a little while, another little while to brown up. And then, ta-da, the beautiful squash, excuse me, the squash has come together very nicely. Pretty much absorbed. Goodness. It has pretty much absorbed all the liquid. Sorry about that. Pretty much absorbed all the liquid. It's creamy. It's darkens a little bit in color, although that might be a little bit harder for you to see from this angle. But it's a little bit, you see, a little bit darker than it's lost. It's kind of bright orange hue, but it's still very, very, very pretty. And now this syrup is, when it's bubbling along, it looks more liquidy, but as soon as the heat gets off it really gets thick and syrupy. Not unlike if you've ever done a balsamic vinegar reduction, same concept, right? You can just put the vinegar right into the pot, give it 5 to 10 minutes to reduce by about half, and then you have this really great thick syrup. So our presentation, by the way, this syrup, if you don't use all of it on your pears, you can keep it in the fridge in a jar and just drizzle it on Greek yogurt or ice cream. It's a beautiful drizzle. It also actually works nicely on these hearty salads that you might make with sliced pears. And if you have, you can even use these poached pears on a nice salad. Poach the pears with a little blue cheese and a dressing that you can use, drizzle some of the glaze on there and some olive oil. It's just like, amazing. Really, really delicious. But today we're going to concentrate on the presentation is going to be as a dessert. And so we're going to let that go for just a minute, and I'm going to take you one last time back over to my overhead on the counter so we can plate up our pears and we can enjoy a bite, or I will enjoy a bite of the gorgeous squash and vanilla and walnuts. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and let this come off the heat. Can you see? You should be able to see it pretty well. How it's bubbled, and
yep.
As soon as like I said, once we reduce the heat on it, it's going to be quite thick and syrupy, just as we want. So one last switch of the camera, and any last minute questions?
Well, just as you're plating, you had mentioned earlier that you were going to save the cinnamon and the vanilla bean to possibly reuse. So how does that work? How can you reuse a vanilla bean?
So the vanilla, yeah, the cinnamon is going to be a little bit kind of trickier to reuse. I'll probably just put that in a pot with water to make the kitchen smell great. But the vanilla beans, yeah, the vanilla beans can be reused. And especially when you're using them in a liquid like this, as opposed to poaching them in milk or cream, which you can use, you can do that for like a creme caramel. These, because of the dairy component, those are harder to, they tend to absorb the dairy in there. And then you've got a different set of issues you're dealing with because of the dairy in terms of the bacteria growth. But this with the liquid, with the wine, these can be reused, and you want to store them either in a Ziploc. You could put them back in. Actually, I probably wouldn't cross them with the clean ones. I would just get them in a jar and use them again for another poaching. Or you can move, if it's been in the wine poach syrup, you can now use these in a dairy. But I wouldn't go the other way. You know what I mean? I wouldn't go from the dairy to the wine. The other great thing that these are great for is put them in your, in your sugar. If you have a container, a canister of sugar, put them in there, and your sugar will take on this very mild but very, very lovely vanilla flavor. And I think that, that's a great tip.
Fantastic. And then we also had someone here who is unfamiliar with half and half. Can you just explain quickly? You had mentioned using half and half, I believe, at some point.
Yes.
Can you just explain what half and half is for someone who may not know?
Yes. Half and half is a combination of half cream and half milk. So it's not quite like a table cream, liquid table cream. It's more runny than that, but it's got a higher fat content than whole milk. So it's what we call the half and half. It's between the two. It's not milk and it's not cream. Okay. Any other questions?
So these are two recipes that pair well with vanilla. What else might pair nicely with vanilla?
So vanilla, yes, vanilla. So any of your sweets, any of your desserts, obviously. Vanilla is just known for going into anything sweet. But as we saw today, you can match it up with savory, with a winter squash. It actually pairs well also with certain seafood. So, and it pairs well with, I have a pork dish, a tenderloin of pork with sauteed pears, or you can do it with sauteed apples and a vanilla apple cider cream sauce that goes on top, which is amazing. But in terms of other spices, or obviously vanilla and cocoa, chocolate, right? Vanilla and cocoa, vanilla and cinnamon, which is what we've done today, vanilla and ginger, which is what we've also done today, vanilla and fennel or anise is a great combination. And then, of course, the hot pepper, like cayenne pepper and chili peppers and vanilla are also a nice match.
Wonderful. There's a question floating in the chat about the size of the smaller pan you were using, and someone referenced it in the chat as a butter warmer. Is that about the size pan you were using to boil up the syrup?
A little bit larger than a butter warmer. Here, let's go to the, we've got only a few minutes left. So let me take you over to my counter so we can look at the pan and look at our beautiful finished product. So it is, it's the smallest size of a set of copper. It's a little bit bigger than a butter warmer, but a butter warmer would do the trick. Well, the amount of liquid you have when you reduce, you need something, you're going to probably need something a little bit bigger than a butter warmer, actually.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, we've got our lovely pears again. And here's the cheese that we're going to fill into the little holes. Just plop it in there. A nice dollop. I'm using the melon baller. You don't have to, but that's just what I happen to have here. Come on. So when you bite into this, obviously you're going to get that lovely creaminess from the cheese spread. And you can go as heavy on this as you like. You know, you can put a little bit. In fact, we can just do that for fun. Put a little bit in between on the plate. If I were to do this for my guests, I would do probably 1/2 pear per person, depending on how much of a large meal you've had. This is beautiful on a larger platter, on a buffet line. You can just have them and people can help themselves to 1 or 2, however many they want. And then our lovely syrup, which really, let me just grab quickly a spoon. And do a drizzle. If you did this on a buffet, you could just have I would drizzle the syrup all over, and then I would have a little pitcher next to my serving platter so people could add extra as they wish. And if you had some mint, you could just garnish it with a little bit of mint. And there we have, does that look delicious enough? Shiny, gorgeous, drizzled. And then this certainly could use a little green parsley as well. So they're 2 very different uses of vanilla, but 2 equally. Start with your meal with this and some roast, and finish your meal with the pears. And there you have it. So enjoy. I hope this was something you could see using. The pears, like I mentioned, you can have them on hand as poached pears, and they're so versatile in a bunch of different ways. So just have fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, people very, very excited. Lots of people wanting just to eat them right now. Also, a lot of love for your puppy on the floor behind you there. Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't like leaving my side. At least she's behaving herself.
She was being very good and very sweet. Yes, very impressed. Yeah, so thank you so much, Danielle. This has been amazing and wonderful. A lot of people say they're going to try the recipes. Again, if you tried them, please share with us on social media. Let us know how you did at US Botanic Garden.